My name is Marcus Hale. I'm 38 years old. Liver lived in Denver, Colorado. And for the past 8 years, I've been married to Amanda. If you had asked anyone who saw us at church on Sundays or at her parents' anniversary party, they'd probably tell you we were one of those polished couples. Always well-dressed, always polite, always smiling at the right moments. The truth, though, is far less tidy. In fact, it's not tidy at all. I used to be the kind of guy who believed that stability was the same thing as happiness. A steady job, a mortgage, weekend barbecues, that was enough. Amanda was beautiful, sharp, confident in ways I admired but never quite matched. She had a way of walking into a room like she owned the air in it. I think I loved that about her, at least at first. But over time, that confidence became something else, something heavier, something colder. I can't tell you the exact day it shifted, but it was slow, like erosion, like the way wind wears down a mountain one gust at a time until all that's left is gravel and dust. That was McGravel and Dust. Back then, I worked in IT support for a medium-sized accounting firm. Not glamorous, but it paid well, and I liked the routine. Amanda ran her own social media consultancy. She worked from home, meaning she was always around. At first, I liked coming home to her. I liked the warm meals, the candles, the soft jazz she played during dinner, but that warmth turned conditional. If I got home late, traffic, a client call, anything, I'd find the food cold and Amanda colder. And somehow, I always ended up being the one who apologized. I guess this is where the story begins, not with fireworks, or betrayal, or drama, just with a man who thought he had everything under control, not realizing he hadn't been in control for years. And if you're wondering how a man like me ends up drugged and dumped 3 states away by his own wife, well, it didn't happen all at once. It was a slow, invisible unraveling, one thread at a time. Amanda liked structure. At least, that's what she said. Systems create peace. She'd whisper as she organized our bank accounts into color-coded folders or tracked our monthly expenses down to the last latte. At first, I thought it was impressive how meticulous she was, how she seemed to have a spreadsheet for everything. Groceries, home repairs, even our vacation itineraries. But structure slowly turned into surveillance. And peace? That became permission. I used to grab coffee with my coworker Brian every Thursday. Just an hour. A standing tradition. One day I mentioned it in passing. Brian said something hilarious today. And Amanda looked up from her laptop, her eyes sharp. "You still do that?" she asked. "Seems like a waste of time." I didn't know what to say. The next week I canceled. Just like that. I told Brian I had too much work. It was easier. Amanda had access to all our financial accounts. Transparency, she called it. We're a team. But somehow, she was the only one with the passwords. I didn't think it was a big deal. Until one day I went to buy new running shoes and my card was declined. When I asked her, she said she'd locked the account temporarily. "You've been spending without planning," she said, her voice calm but distant. I started to feel like a tenant in my own life. Like every step I took was under review. Even my phone didn't feel like mine anymore. "Just leave it unlocked," she'd say. "I trust you, but it's about principle." And when I pushed back just lightly, she'd freeze me out. Not yelling, no drama, just silence. The kind that fills a room like fog and doesn't go away. I stopped calling my sister too. Amanda said she was too negative, always reminding me of things that weren't useful. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, my world shrank. Fewer friends, fewer decisions, less color, less air. But from the outside, everything looked perfect. Our Christmas cards were immaculate. Our Instagram stories carefully curated. Amanda knew how to create an image. I was part of that image. But only as long as I stayed where she placed me. Somewhere deep inside, resentment started to take root. It wasn't loud. It didn't scream. It whispered. And I ignored it for too long. There were still quiet places I could crawl, in toady moments I claimed as mine. Late nights in the garage with the door cracked open just enough to let in the smell of cold pine air. I started messing with wood scraps I picked up from a lumberyard a few miles out. Nothing fancy. A small bench. A crooked birdhouse. My hands needed something to shape, something that didn't ask for permission or explain itself. Amanda hated the sawdust. "It gets into the vents," she complained once, wiping invisible flecks from the countertop. "And it smells like rot." I tried to clean up better after that. Still, every time she passed the garage, she rolled her eyes like I was caught finger painting. I never told her how the weight of the hammer, the steady sound of sanding, helped keep me from unraveling. Or how writing just journaling, nothing poetic let me feel something like control again. I bought a leather notebook one day after work and kept it in my sock drawer. I'd write in it when Amanda was asleep. The soft scratching of pen against paper like a secret heartbeat. "You really think any of that matters?" she asked once, holding up a small wooden box I'd made. I had left it on the kitchen table, proud of the smooth corners and even grain. "You don't even finish most of your little projects." I didn't respond. I just took the box and set it on a shelf in the garage. I told myself it didn't matter what she thought. But it did. She made everything feel small me interests. My joy. Even my breath. But I kept at it. Because those hours in the garage or hunched over a notebook were the only places I still felt like a person instead of a prop. And that made them worth hiding. It was a Sunday afternoon when the dam finally cracked. Amanda had gone to visit her mother, and I on a whim drove out to my cousin Leo's birthday cookout. I didn't plan it. I just got in the car and drove. For a few hours, I laughed. Ate ribs. Played cornhole with people who remembered me before the edges dulled. I didn't check my phone once. That was my mistake. When I got home, Amanda was already back. She was sitting at the dining table, arms folded, her phone face down in front of her like a weapon. "Where were you?" she asked, though she already knew. "Leo's," I said. It was his birthday. Silence, then the sharp inhale. "Without telling me?" she asked. "Without asking me?" The room shrank. "Amanda, I didn't think I needed to." "That's the problem," she snapped, standing up so quickly the chair legs scraped the floor. "You never think. You just do what you want, like I'm invisible. Do you have any idea how that looks? Me, here, telling my mother you're out. What, playing beer pong?" I opened my mouth to answer, but she didn't let me. "You embarrassed me. You disrespected me." Her voice trembled with fury, but her eyes were dry, cold, controlled. I tried to explain, but every word I spoke was twisted, flipped, and thrown back at me. She talked for nearly an hour, pacing, listing every moment I had ever made her feel undermined. By the end, I wasn't even sure what we were fighting about. Only that I had committed some silent crime I didn't know the rules for. That night, I slept on the couch, staring at the ceiling, my chest hollow. I had gone to a family cookout, and somehow, it turned into betrayal. Somehow, I was the villain, and the worst part was, I believed it. The house grew quiet. Not the kind of quiet that soothes, but the kind that settles in your chest like frost. After the fight about Leo's party, Amanda didn't yell, didn't cry, didn't even slam a door. She just stopped speaking. The next morning, I woke up to the smell of coffeeers, not Minnie and the sound of her closing cabinets, careful and controlled. When I walked into the kitchen and said, "Good morning," she didn't flinch, didn't look up. She moved around me like I wasn't there. For the next 3 days, that's how it went. No eye contact. No questions, no answers. Just the scrape of utensils, the clicking of her keyboard in the home office, the distant thrum of her workout videos. When she passed me in the hallway, it felt like walking through a cold draft. I tried to initiate conversation once, just a simple, "Can we talk?" But she blinked past me and shut the bathroom door. The lock clicked. I sat on the couch that night, staring at a paused TV screen, the remote heavy in my hand. I couldn't even remember what I was trying to watch. I wanted to tell myself she just needed space, that this was her process. But I knew better. This was how she punished me. Not with screaming or threats, but with silence sharp enough to cut skin. And it worked. By the fourth day, I was apologizing to the air, to her closed door, to myself. I found myself walking more carefully, speaking less, shrinking down to avoid confrontation. I wasn't even sure what I was trying to fix anymore. I just didn't want to feel invisible. Or worse, irrelevant. On the fifth night, I came home to dim lights and soft music, playing through the Bluetooth speaker, Miles Davis, one of the few jazz records Amanda said she could tolerate. The scent of garlic and rosemary drifted from the kitchen. I paused at the doorway, confused. Amanda stood at the dining table in a dark blue dress I hadn't seen in years, lighting a final candle with a long match. "Dinner," she said simply, as if the last 4 days had never happened. I thought we should reconnect. The table was set for 2, real plates, cloth napkins, a bottle of red wine breathing in a crystal decanter. I sat down slowly, unsure if I was being welcomed or tested. "I overreacted," Amanda said, pouring the wine into 2 glasses. "You were right to see your cousin. I get scared sometimes. Of losing control. Of losing you." She looked at me then, eyes glassy but still guarded. I didn't know what to say. The sudden softness made me dizzy. The smell of the roast, the flicker of candlelight, the weight of her Gesite, all pressed in too fast. "Let's just move on," she said, sliding my glass toward me. "Okay?" I nodded, my throat dry. I picked up the wine glass. My hand shook slightly as I raised it. The wine was dark and smooth, with a bite that lingered at the back of my throat. Amanda smiled, lifting her own glass. "To fresh starts," she whispered. I forced a smile in return, but something in my chest felt off. Not wrong, just hollow. Like I had walked into a trap lined with silk and violins. Like the apology wasn't really about healing, but resetting the game. I woke up on a bed that wasn't mine, staring at a ceiling that didn't belong to any house I'd ever lived in. For a few seconds, I didn't move. My tongue was dry, stuck to the roof of my mouth. My head throbbed with a pressure that didn't feel like sleep, more like I'd been hit with something heavy and soft, like fog made of steel. I sat up slowly. The room was dim, lit only by a weak shaft of sunlight cutting through dusty blinds. Beige wallpaper, chipped dresser, a stained chair in the corner. I looked around for Amanda, or any sign that I'd been dreaming, but the room was empty, dead silent. I patted my pockets. No phone, no wallet, not even my keys. Just the clothes on my back, wrinkled and smelling faintly of something floral like I'd been wiped down with drugstore cologne. My shoes were at the foot of the bed, neatly placed. That detail chilled me more than anything. Someone had undressed me. Someone had made me comfortable. I stood, legs shaky. My knees buckled for a second, but I caught myself on the bedpost. My watch was gone too. I opened the dresser. Empty. The nightstand held a cracked Bible and a notepad from a place called Silver Pines Motel. I didn't recognize the logo. I didn't recognize anything. I staggered to the window and pulled the blinds. Outside was a gravel parking lot, a rusted soda machine, and 2 pickup trucks coated in mud. Behind them, a stretch of pine trees reaching toward a gray sky. That was the moment panic bloomed in my chest, spreading like wildfire. I didn't know where I was. I didn't know how I got there. And Amanda, me wife, wasn't answering any of the questions screaming in my head. That was the moment I understood something had gone terribly wrong. Not just wrong, intentional. The woman at the front desk looked at me like I was either high or dangerous. "Room 14, she said, flipping through a reservation log that looked handwritten. "Checked in last night. Paid in cash. No ID." I stared at her, my voice rasping. "Do you know who brought me here?" She shrugged, chewing her gums slowly. "You were already in the bed when I came on shift this morning." I stepped outside. The air was thin and cold, sharp with the scent of pine and motor oil. I turned in a slow circle, scanning the few buildings within view. A diner, a small gas station, a sign that read, "Welcome to Ellensburg, Idaho." I had never been to Idaho, never driven through it, didn't know anyone here. And yet, here I was abandoned, like a piece of lost luggage. I walked to the gas station, hoping to borrow a phone. The attendant, a man in his 60s with a long white beard and mirrored sunglasses, leaned on the counter and said, "Rough night?" I nodded, trying to keep my voice steady. "Can I use your phone?" "Mine's gone." He handed over a dusty landline. I dialed Amanda's number from memory. It rang, and rang, then clicked, her voice calm. Bright answered. "Marcus," she said. "You're awake." I blinked. "Where am I?" "Somewhere quiet," she said, her voice like honey over ice. "You needed perspective. A lesson. I thought a little space might help you see things differently." "Amanda," I whispered, the phone slick in my hand. "What did you do?" "You'll be fine," she said, and then she hung up. I stood there, the dial tone humming in my ear, while the man behind the counter watched me without a word. I wanted to scream, to throw the phone, to wake up for real, but I didn't. I just placed the handset down gently, like it might explode, because in a way, it already had. The phone cord curled around my fingers as I stared at the cold gray countertop. The old man behind the register kept pretending to restock beef jerky, but I could feel his eyes flick up every few seconds, watching me like I might collapse. Maybe I would. The line clicked again. "Marcus," Amanda said. No panic. No urgency. Her voice was steady, even cheerful, like she was calling to remind me we were out of milk. "You're awake." My throat tightened. "Where am I?" I asked, trying to sound calm, though the question sounded pathetic the moment it left my mouth. "You're in Idaho," she said plainly. "Ellensburg. It's quiet, peaceful. Isn't that what you always said you wanted?" I closed my eyes. The motel, the missing phone, the cash-only check-in. "What did you do?" I whispered. "You drugged me. You left me." A pause. Then, "Don't be dramatic, Marcus. You're fine. I didn't leave you in the desert. There's food, a bed, running water. You're not in danger." I almost laughed, but it caught in my throat like a shard of glass. "What the hell is this? A prank?" Her voice didn't shift. "No. It's a reset. That's what this is. You needed it." I just accelerated the process. I looked out the dusty window of the gas station. The sun had risen higher, casting long shadows across the parking lot. But inside me, the darkness only deepened. "You can't just do this," I said, my voice rising. "You can't just abandon someone in a different state like they're—" "I didn't abandon you," she interrupted gently. "I freed you." Then she hung up. No goodbye, no hesitation. Just silence. Again. That was when it sank. And this wasn't a mistake or some impulsive meltdown. She planned this. She executed it like a spreadsheet. And worst of all, she believed it was justified. I sat outside the gas station for almost an hour, on a broken bench with one wobbly leg, watching cars roll by on the highway like I was waiting for one to stop and take me back to my old life. But no one stopped. No one even slowed down. The town was small, maybe a few hundred people, and it seemed to operate like a self-contained clock, ticking forward without me. I had no phone, no wallet, no ID, no way to prove who I was to anyone. I found a quiet bench outside the diner and sat down, trying to make sense of the last 24 hours. Amanda's words echoed, looping through my skull like a song I didn't want to remember. "You needed a reset. You'll be fine." What she meant was, I was a problem she had solved. When the waitress inside saw me sitting too long without ordering, she came out with a plastic cup of water and slid it onto the table. "You waiting for someone?" she asked. I hesitated, then shook my head, just catching my breath. Long road trip? Something like that, I muttered. I wasn't sure what to call it. A kidnapping with love notes? An exile signed with a glass of wine? Amanda's voice kept resurfacing. You'll be fine. You needed this. You were stuck. I did what you wouldn't. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized she wasn't trying to punish me. She was trying to break me and rebuild me in her image. A version of me that didn't question her, that didn't have needs or boundaries or history. A blank slate. A shadow with her smile stamped into it. But I wasn't going to let that happen. I didn't know how yet, but I would find a way. Because I might have nothing now, but for the first time in years, I was finally alone. And for once, that felt like the beginning of something, not the end. I left the diner with the plastic cup still in my hand, my legs moving faster than my thoughts. The anger hit me like a sudden fever. My jaw clenched so tight it ached. I walked until I found a sheriff's office, a squat brick building next to a bait shop, the kind of place you'd miss if you blinked. Inside, a woman in uniform sat behind a scratched desk, typing slowly. I need help, I said, my voice breaking before I could catch it. She looked up, blinking behind wire-rimmed glasses. What's going on? I explained everything well, almost everything. Not the wine, not the silence, just the facts. My wife drugged me, took my phone and wallet, dumped me in Idaho without telling me where I was. Her expression shifted between sympathy and doubt. Do you have any ID on you? No, I said. She took everything. Okay, she replied slowly. Do you have any way to verify your identity? Any social security number, contact, photo ID, anything we can work with? I gave her my full name, birth date, where I used to work. She typed, sighed, typed again. Nothing's coming up local, she said. You're not in the system here. And we can't just file a missing person case for someone who isn't missing. I'm not missing, I said, my voice sharp. I was left. She leaned back, arms crossed. Sir, I'm not saying I don't believe you, but without documentation, you're just a guy who says his wife put him here. We see transients, folks, running from things. We have to be careful. I'm not transient, I whispered. I'm a husband. I had a life. A home, too, was normal. She looked at me like I had said something sadder than I meant it to be. I can give you a list of shelters, she said. You might try Pastor Jim's down on Willow Creek. I didn't take the paper she offered. I just nodded and left. The cold slamming into me like guilt. I had come here for help, and all I had now was the knowledge that I was alone. Officially. I found Pastor Jim's not by address, but by the sound of a guitar echoing through a dusty lot behind an old hardware store. It wasn't a church, just a house with peeling paint and a crooked mailbox that read, Grace always wins. An older woman answered the door, her face framed by silver curls and a worn cardigan. She didn't ask for a story, just tilted her head and said, You look cold. Her name was Judith. Her husband, Carl, appeared a few minutes later with a thermos of coffee and a quiet nod. I told them the bare minimum, left out the wine, the silence, the soft-spoken cruelty. Just said I'd been stranded and had nowhere to go. The garage is insulated, Carl said. It's not much, but it's dry. It had a cot, an old fridge, and a stack of paint cans in one corner. The air smelled like pine and oil, but it was better than the motel. Better than pretending I had a plan. That night, under a borrowed blanket, I stared at the exposed beams above me and felt the weight of everything I'd lost. Not just my phone or my wallet, but my sense of place in the world. The next morning, I tried to help. Swept the driveway, hauled firewood, repaired a broken cabinet hinge in their kitchen. Carl didn't say much, but when he handed me a sandwich, his eyes said, enough. They didn't need me to confess. They just needed someone who didn't take more than they gave. I worked in silence, grateful for something to do with my hands. Shame clung to me like sweat. I had been a man with a home, a wife, a routine. Now I was patching siding for strangers. But the strangest part? The silence in the garage felt gentler than the silence I'd left behind. Softer, forgiving. Like for the first time in a long time, I could breathe. On the third morning, after Carl handed me a plate of eggs and Judith refilled my coffee, I borrowed Carl's laptop. He didn't ask questions, just pointed to the kitchen table and said the Wi-Fi password was Jeremiah 2911. The kindness made me feel worse somehow. I opened a browser and logged into the online banking portal. Amanda and I always used Zenly to find the login rejected. I tried again, then again. Finally, I clicked Forgot Password, and the recovery prompt came up. Security questions updated. Please verify via text message. Except my phone, the one Amanda took, was the only linked number. I sat back in the chair, my stomach tightening. I moved on to our joint credit card. Declined. Another card. Cancelled. Every account I tried led to a dead end. Even the retirement account I had set up years ago was frozen due to suspicious activity. I called the bank's customer service line and spent an hour on hold, explaining my situation to 3 different reps. Eventually, a woman named Megan, who sounded young and slightly nervous, spoke up. "Sir, it appears all accounts tied to your name were legally transitioned to single-user access through a financial power of attorney document." "A what?" I asked, my voice brittle. "There's a signed and notarized document from your wife, Amanda Hale, stating that due to your incapacitation, she assumed temporary financial control of your shared accounts. It's dated 2 weeks ago." I couldn't speak. My hands trembled. "Is there anything else I can help you with?" Megan asked. "No," I said, then paused. "Actually, yes. Can you tell me the exact date that document was filed?" "Yes. It was signed on the 14th. Submitted electronically the same day. The 14th. 3 days before the candlelit dinner. Before the wine. Before I vanished." I hung up the call and stared at the dark screen. I thought I'd been blindsided. I hadn't. I'd been targeted. For hours, I sat on the edge of the garage cot, the laptop closed beside me, the silence in my ears louder than any siren. Every puzzle piece clicked into place, neat, clean, deliberate. The wine wasn't a spontaneous act. The silence wasn't a mood swing. Even the apology, the music, the roast chicken, the soft blue dress, it was all set dressing. Amanda hadn't lost control. She had seized it. I thought we'd had a fight, a bad one, and she'd snapped. But this wasn't snapping. This was planning. Cold, calculated, strategic. She'd drugged me. Stripped my identity. Disappeared me into a place where no one knew my name and no one could help me. It wasn't just about punishment. It was about erasure. She wanted me powerless, stranded, erased from the world I had built. And it worked. The life I'd spent years maintaining, my job, my finances, my community, had collapsed in 3 silent days. And all without her raising her voice. Amanda had always been meticulous. From how she arranged the spice rack alphabetically to how she folded towels in thirds instead of halves. But I never imagined that same precision could be weaponized. That she could look me in the eye while pouring wine laced with whatever it was, and smile. That she could schedule a financial execution between grocery runs and yoga. The realization didn't come with tears, it came with stillness. Like standing in the eye of a hurricane, just long enough to feel the shape of the storm. I wasn't angry, not in that moment. I was hollow. But beneath the hollowness, something stirred. Not revenge. Not even justice. Just truth. For years, I thought Amanda was difficult, demanding, intense. Now I knew the truth. She was dangerous. And if I wanted any chance at a future, any life at all, I couldn't go back. I had to build something new. Far away from her. Far away from the man I had been. You'd be surprised how quickly dignity takes a back seat when hunger gets involved. By the end of my first week in Ellensburg, my pride had withered into something small and silent. I stopped thinking about what I used to do, and started focusing on what I could do right now. It turns out in a town like this, there's always something that needs fixing. Fence posts that need resetting. Gutters clogged from last fall. Dead branches after a windstorm. Word spreads fast in small places, and by the second weekend, people started to recognize Minot as the guy with no wallet, but as the guy who worked cheap and didn't ask for much. One afternoon, after trimming hedges for a retired teacher named Ms. Palmer, she handed me a thermos of soup and a brown envelope with 40 inside. "It's not much," she said, "but you earned it." I thanked her and meant it. You don't realize how meaningful a warm bowl of soup can be until your last 3 meals came from vending machines and pity. A few days later, I wandered into Hank's Hardware on Main Street. I didn't even go in looking for work. I just needed a warm place to stand. Hank was behind the register, silver-bearded and broad-shouldered, with hands like cracked leather. He watched me study a rack of utility knives for too long and said, "You handy?" I nodded. "Used to be." He tossed me a work shirt without looking up from his paper. "Start tomorrow, 7 sharp. Don't be late." That was it. No resume, no interview. Just a shirt, a nod, and a chance. I folded the shirt carefully and pressed it to my chest like it was something sacred. That night, I had a place to go and a reason to wake up. It wasn't much, but it was something. And after everything Amanda stripped from me, something felt like a lifeline. The job came with more than I expected, mostly in the form of keys. Hank handed me a small silver one on my 3rd day. "For the back room," he said. "Figured you could use a roof. The garage can't smell great." I followed him past the registers, through a narrow hallway lined with dusty shelves, until we reached the last door on the right. He pushed it open to reveal a small room no bigger than a walk-in closet. Metal shelves stacked with paint cans, light bulbs, and unopened boxes lined the walls. In the corner was an old army cot with a sleeping bag rolled tight. "It's not the Ritz," Hank said, "but it's clean, and it's yours." I stood there for a moment, unsure whether to thank him or cry. "This okay?" he asked, adjusting his cap. I nodded. "It's more than okay," he grunted. "You don't snore, do you?" I cracked a smile for the first time in days. "Not unless I've been drugged." He didn't laugh, just raised an eyebrow. "Whatever happened to you, son?" he said. "You're still standing. That counts for something." The back room became home. I moved my things, in what little I had. Judith gave me a folded towel and an extra pillow. Carl brought over a portable space heater. I didn't have a closet, but I had a hook for my coat. I didn't have a kitchen, but the break room microwave did the trick. At night, I lay on the cot with the steady tick of the store's wall clock echoing down the hall. No sirens, no Amanda. No questions I didn't want to answer. Just the smell of pine, oil, and the faint rustle of mice in the ceiling. It was quiet, honest, and for the first time in weeks, I slept through the night. It started with a pen I found wedged behind the register. Cheap plastic. The ink skipped when I tried to write with it, but it felt good in my hand, solid, familiar. That night, back in the back room, I found an old invoice pad and tore off the company logo from the top. Then I began writing. At first, it was just dates and fragments. Friday, Judith made soup again. Rain. My hands hurt. Amanda hasn't called. Good. But the more I wrote, the more came out. It was like unclogging a pipe. Words I hadn't said out loud in years poured onto the pages. Memories. Thoughts. Things I should have screamed during fights but swallowed instead. I didn't write to make sense of her. I wrote to remember who I was before her. Before the silence. Before the constant second-guessing. Before I learned to apologize for taking up space in my own life. By the end of the first week, I'd filled an old shipping notebook. Hank, let me keep. I started giving the entries titles. The garage door was never broken. She knew I didn't like red wine. Silence is a strategy. The act of writing didn't fix anything. It didn't bring back my bank account, or phone, or life. but it gave shape to my thoughts lines where there used to be fog. And with every page, I felt the fog thinning. I wasn't healing, not yet. But I was documenting the damage, naming the wreckage. And sometimes, that's the first step toward walking away from it. It came on a Tuesday. A manila envelope addressed to Marcus Hale, C.O. Hanks Hardware, printed in firm, unforgiving font. Hank handed it to me with a look I didn't recognize. Maybe pity, maybe concern. I took it to the back room and stared at it for a while before opening it. I already knew who it was from. Inside was a certified letter from Amanda's attorney. Notice of intent to file for legal separation. The language was cold, precise, clinical, citing prolonged absence, emotional distance, and abandonment of marital responsibilities. I laughed short, bitter. Abandonment. Like I had packed a bag and vanished on purpose. Like she hadn't knocked me unconscious with kindness and left me in the middle of nowhere like a misplaced suitcase. I read it 3 times, just to make sure I wasn't missing something. Nope. Same lie in black and white. Same spin of the wheel she always controlled. At the bottom was a note in Amanda's handwriting, in blue ink. Marcus, let's keep this civil. You left me no choice. No choice. That part hit harder than the letter itself, because it proved what I'd come to understand. Amanda didn't regret what she did. She never would. This wasn't a mistake. It was the next move in a game I hadn't realized we were playing, and she still expected me to play along. But this time, I wouldn't. Her name was Rebecca Klein, and she ran her practice out of a renovated farmhouse, just past the county line. Judith knew her through a church fundraiser and gave me the number on a napkin, along with a gentle squeeze of the hand. Just talk to her, she said. You've stayed quiet long enough. I didn't want to call. I didn't want to retell the story again to see the confusion in someone's face when I explained my wife drugged me and dumped me in Idaho for perspective. But the napkin stayed in my pocket. I kept touching it, smoothing out the creases like it might turn into courage if I held it long enough. On Friday morning, I finally called. Rebecca's voice was steady. No judgment, just questions. Do you have any proof of the financial power of attorney she filed? I told her about the bank call, the freezing of accounts, the letter accusing me of abandonment. Come in, she said. Tomorrow morning. I'll take a look. The office was warm, full of mismatched furniture and legal books stacked like bricks. She listened as I walked her through everything, leaving out the worst parts, then adding them back in when I realized she wasn't flinching. When I finished, she tapped her pen against a legal pad and said, "This isn't just ugly, it's abusive, and it's illegal." My throat caught. I didn't expect those words to feel like water in a desert. I don't have money, I said. I'm sleeping in a storage room. She nodded. You're not my first pro bono case. Won't be the last. I stared at her, not trusting that kind of kindness. Not yet. We'll file a response to the separation. She continued. But more importantly, we'll file a counterclaim. Financial fraud, coercion, maybe even false imprisonment, depending on how bold we want to get. Bold. The word echoed in my chest like a dare. I nodded. Let's be bold. The first time I signed a legal document with my own name since Amanda left me in Idaho, my hand shook. Not from fear but from the weight of it. Marcus Hale. Not husband. Not suspect. Not problem. Just me. Rebecca laid out the process clearly. Affidavits, financial records, notarized statements. I spent days gathering what little I could, old pay stubs I'd emailed to myself once. Emails Amanda sent about controlling spending. A printout of my bank lockout log. We built a case out of scraps. The same way I was rebuilding myself. Slowly. Deliberately. I spent my nights in the back room sorting through memories, tying dates to details. The week she cut off my debit card, I had to ask to buy gas. The dinner where she apologized 3 days before the notarized power of attorney was submitted. I documented everything. Facts. Patterns. Proof. It felt like putting pins on a map, marking the path I hadn't realized I was on until it ended in exile. Rebecca filed our response. The courthouse was just 2 rooms and a tired judge who looked like he'd rather be fishing. But when we submitted the paperwork, I felt something shift. Not in the world, but inside me. For the first time, I wasn't just reacting to what Amanda had done. I was acting, reclaiming, saying, "No more." When we walked out of the building, Rebecca turned to me and said, "We're not done, but we've started." I nodded, the wind cold against my face, but I didn't flinch. "Let her come for me," I said. "I'll be ready this time." Ellensburg wasn't the kind of town that asked a lot of questions, but it remembered things. Who shoveled driveways after the first snow? Who helped Mrs. Dempsey carry her groceries? Who fixed the leaky pipe in the back of Miller's barbershop without charging a cent? And somewhere along the way, they stopped calling me that guy from the hardware store and started calling me Marcus. It wasn't dramatic. No parades. No fanfare. Just small nods. Waves from passing trucks. A free coffee slipped across the counter at the diner. Hank started letting me run the register solo. Judith began asking for my opinion on recipes. Carl offered to teach me how to properly split firewood. People didn't need to know every detail of how I got here. They just needed to see how I moved now. Quiet. Reliable. Present. I showed up when I said I would. I kept my head down but not buried. My work spoke for me when I couldn't. I wasn't healed, not even close, but I was useful. And in a world that had once stripped me of purpose, that usefulness felt like gold. I still slept on a cot. I still kept my journal under my pillow. But when I walked through town, I walked straighter. Because I wasn't drifting anymore. I belonged somewhere, even if just a little. The storm came through overnight. Heavy rain. Gusts strong enough to shake windows. By morning, the old church off Maple had lost half its shingles. Pastor Jim stood out front, staring up at the jagged gap in the roofline with a quiet kind of grief. I didn't wait to be asked. I just showed up. Hank loaned me the tools. Carl helped load the supplies. By mid-afternoon, I was up on the scaffolding, the wind biting through my jacket as I hammered each nail with something close to reverence. The building had seen generations pass through its door sweatings, funerals, baptisms, heartbreaks. It had held stories longer than I'd been alive. Fixing it felt right. Like I was giving something back to the town that hadn't asked where I came from before handing me a second chance. A few people drove by slowly, watching me work. I heard one man say, "That's the guy who fixed Carol's porch." And someone else reply, "Yeah, Marcus. Quiet fella. Good with his hands." By dusk, the last shingle was secured. Pastor Jim came out with 2 steaming mugs of cider and handed me one. "That roof's been holding on longer than it should have," he said. "Kinda like some people I know." I smiled. The kind that starts at the chest instead of the face. I didn't need a thank you. The cider was enough. The nod even more so. And as I stood there looking at the patched roof against the fading sky, I realized something I hadn't felt in a long time. I was proud. Not of surviving Amanda, but of what I'd built since. The voicemail came in just after noon on a Wednesday. I was in the middle of restocking shelves at Hank's, hands covered in cardboard dust, when my new phone buzzed in my pocket. Unknown number. Idaho area code. I already knew who it was. I let it go to voicemail. My stomach twisted, but I didn't stop working. 20 minutes later, curiosity won out. I listened in the break room. Alone. Amanda's voice came through the speaker, shaky but trying to sound composed. "Marcus, I heard from my attorney. You've responded. You're countersuing?" A pause. Breathing. "You don't have to do this. You don't need to blow everything up." Another pause, longer this time. "We could talk. Maybe we could agree on something. Privately. Civilly. This doesn't have to get ugly." She was unraveling, and she didn't even realize how loud it sounded. "I'm willing to be reasonable, Marcus. But this isn't you." That last line stuck with me. "This isn't you." She meant it as a warning, a manipulation, maybe even a plea. But to me, it sounded like confirmation. She no longer recognized me. And that meant I was finally becoming someone new. Someone outside her blueprint. Someone free. She called again that evening. Then, the next morning, her voice grew tighter, less friendly. By the third message, she was blaming me. "You're making this difficult. You could have just moved on." I tried to be generous. That word generous nearly made me laugh out loud. I deleted every voicemail, every message. I didn't need to hear them. I already knew the playbook. Guilt, control, charm, intimidation. Amanda had mastered the cycle. But this time, I wasn't sitting at the table. I had built a new one. And the seat she used to occupy in my head? Vacant. The next call came 3 days later. This time, I didn't even flinch. I watched the screen light up her name in bold letters. Too familiar, too loud. Then I pressed the side button and let the light go dark. I didn't listen to the voicemail. I didn't wonder what she said. I didn't replay it in my head. I just left it untouched. The silence felt powerful. Not the kind Amanda used to punish me, but the kind I chose. The kind that meant boundaries, peace, a closed door. And for the first time since I woke up in that motel bed weeks ago, I wasn't waiting for an apology, or an explanation, or anything at all. I owed her nothing, not even acknowledgement. That night, I wrote one sentence in my journal. Ignoring Amanda isn't avoidance, it's self-respect. I turned off my phone. Then I turned out the light, and I slept without dreams. It started with a casual conversation outside the hardware store. A woman in a red parka asked if I knew where to buy weatherproof tarps. I pointed her toward aisle 6, and she lingered. "You're the guy fixing the church roof, right?" I nodded, wiping sawdust from my palms. "That's me." She smiled. "My cousin's a reporter at the Mountain Echo. She said they're looking for local human interest stories. I think yours counts." I laughed, unsure how to respond. I wasn't interested in headlines. I just wanted peace. But later that night, I told Judith about it, and she said something that stuck. People need to hear what survival actually looks like. It's not always clean, but it matters. So I called the reporter. Her name was Lacey. She met me outside the diner with a notepad, a tape recorder, and eyes that didn't blink much. "You okay telling me everything?" she asked. "As much as you can handle," I replied. I told her about Amanda. The wine. The motel. The bank accounts. I didn't dramatize. It didn't have to. The facts were absurd enough. Lacey's article ran 2 days later. "Man left for dead in Idaho builds a new life." The headline made me sound tougher than I felt, but the story struck a nerve. Locals started coming into Hank's not for nails or screws but to shake my hand. People told me their own stories. Of control. Of isolation. Of the moment they finally walked away. For the first time, I wasn't just surviving. I was seen. And not through Amanda's eyes. Through my own. The final hearing was over Zoom, which somehow made it feel both unreal and far too intimate. I sat in Rebecca's office, the laptop open in front of us. Amanda's face blinked onto the screen, perfectly lit, perfectly composed, wearing a pearl necklace. I once bought her for an anniversary she forgot to mention. "Your Honor," her lawyer began. "This was an unfortunate series of events born from miscommunication, not malice." Amanda nodded, lips pursed. "My husband had been unstable," she said. "He wouldn't accept help. I made a hard decision to create distance for his own well-being." Rebecca didn't flinch. "And that distance included removing his identification, draining shared accounts, and leaving him unconscious in a different state?" Amanda's eyes narrowed. "He's twisting this. We have evidence," Rebecca replied calmly. "Bank statements. A notarized power of attorney filed days before the incident. A recorded voicemail in which Mrs. Hale admits to orchestrating the abandonment." The judge leaned forward, eyes scanning the documents. Amanda's voice wavered. "He disappeared. I didn't know where he was. He called you the day he woke up, Rebecca said. We have that record too. The silence that followed was longer than necessary. Heavy. The judge finally spoke. Mrs. Hale, regardless of your intentions, your actions show a deliberate effort to control, mislead, and financially incapacitate your spouse. Mr. Hale, your response is warranted. The court sides with you. I didn't cry. I didn't cheer. I just breathed deep, full, clear. Amanda's screen blinked off. I didn't feel victorious. I felt free. And that was more than enough. The paperwork wasn't complicated. Just a few forms, a modest filing fee, and a short statement. Petitioner requests a legal name change for personal reasons. That was it. But sitting in the clerk's office, staring at the line that read Marcus Halamy old name, something inside me paused. That name had worn me like an old coat for years. It had survived Amanda's control. It had stood trial quietly, obediently. And now, I was folding it away for good. I chose Marcus Reed. Reed was my mother's maiden name. She passed when I was 17, but I remembered how she used to say, "There's strength in simplicity." Reed was clean, brief, uncomplicated, the kind of name you don't need to explain. When the judge approved it, he nodded and said, "A clean start, Mr. Reed." And I smiled, because for once, the court was on time with its metaphors. I walked out of that building with a new driver's license, new social security card application, new bank account under a new name. Amanda's fingerprints were nowhere on them. I wasn't erasing the past. I was simply refusing to let it brand me anymore. That night, I took the old nameplate from my locker at Hanks Marcus Haley and tucked it in the back of my journal, not as a keepsake, as a reminder that I survived it, and I never had to wear it again. It started with a patch of dirt, just outside town, half an acre, with overgrown grass and a rusted mailbox that leaned like it had given up. But I saw the shape of something in it. Possibility. Peace. I bought the land with a cashier's check, every cent saved from weeks of work and side jobs. Hank came with me to look it over. "Not much," he said, squinting at the lot. "But it's honest." I nodded. "So am I now." I sketched the house myself. Nothing elaborate, just a one-bedroom with a wide porch, a wood stove, and big windows for the light to pour in. Carl helped me dig the foundation. Judith brought sandwiches and a prayer. The rest I did with my hands. Framing, wiring, insulation. I watched YouTube videos late into the night, measuring twice, cutting once. When the roof went on, I cried not because it was finished, but because I had built something no one could take away from me. I filled it with secondhand furniture, sanded smooth and made new again. Each piece had a story. Like me, I planted a tree in the front yard, small, crooked, but rooted. In the mornings, I'd sit on the porch with black coffee and watch the wind bend its branches. It swayed, but it held. That tree, that house, that life, they weren't big, but they were mine. And that was more than I had ever asked for. I never planned to share the journal. It started as survival scribbled confessions in a backroom cot, late-night entries under flickering light. But over time, those pages became more than a record. They became a map, a before and after, a way to explain to myself what had happened and who I'd become because of it. Lacey, the same reporter who first told my story in the Mountain Echowas, the one who suggested it. "What if you turned the journal into something more?" she said. "Other people go through this. They just don't know how to talk about it." We met at the diner once a week. She helped me organize the entries, shape them into chapters, cut what didn't need to be said, and highlight what no one else would dare say. "This isn't about revenge," she reminded me. "It's about truth." A local publisher's mall, independent and deeply curious, took a chance on it. They didn't change the title, left with nothing. They said it spoke for itself. The book wasn't flashy. It didn't become a bestseller or spark some viral trend, but it found its people. I started getting letters handwritten, folded carefully tucked into manila envelopes. Men, women, even teenagers who said, "I thought I was crazy until I read your story." Others simply wrote, "Thank you for saying it." Each time I held one of those letters, I remembered the man who had woken up in that motel bed, disoriented, lost, erased. And I wanted to tell him, "You made it." The memoir didn't make me rich, but it gave meaning to the pain. And in the quiet pages of a paperback, I'd left something behind that Amanda couldn't touch. I never mailed it. I never even addressed the envelope. But I wrote the letter all the Samian, a quiet Sunday morning. The windows open, the house still. "Amanda, you always needed to have the last word. The clean image, the upper hand. You thought leaving me alone, stripped and erased, would break me. Maybe it almost did. But you gave me something you didn't mean to. You gave me silence. And in that silence, I found myself. You taught me that love built on fear isn't love at all. That control dressed in concern is still control. That a home is not a place where you apologize for being alive. You were the storm, but I was the one who learned to build after it passed. I don't hate you. I don't miss you. I don't owe you anything. You buried me, but I planted myself instead." Marcus Reed. I folded the letter, tucked it between the last pages of my journal, and left it there unsent, but finished. Because closure doesn't come from confrontation. Sometimes, it comes from choosing not to carry the weight anymore. And as the sun rose over the crooked tree in my yard, I realized I hadn't just survived Amanda. I had outgrown her. This story was brutal. But this story on the right-hand side is even more insane.